It's happened again, hasn't it? You glance at the clock and it's 3 a.m., wide awake, restless, and wondering why your body won't let you sleep through the night. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Millions of men deal with this frustrating pattern, and while it might seem harmless at first, it can actually signal deeper health challenges. Stress, poor sleep habits, even the way you eat or move during the day can all play a role. But here's the good news: waking up at 3 a.m. every night isn't something you have to just accept. With the right changes in your lifestyle, you can reset your body's rhythm and finally start enjoying deep, restorative sleep. In this video, we're going to break down why this happens, what it reveals about your health, and simple, practical steps you can start taking today to stop it. Because when your nights are better, your days get stronger and your health follows. So let's get into it. When we talk about waking up at 3 in the morning, night after night, it might feel like a mystery or even a strange coincidence. But in reality, it is often the body's way of signaling that something deeper is going on. One of the most important players in this process is a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is sometimes referred to as the stress hormone, and while it has earned a reputation as something negative, it actually plays an essential role in keeping us alive. Cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands, which sit just above the kidneys, and it helps regulate metabolism, blood pressure, and the body's response to stress. Under normal circumstances, cortisol follows a daily rhythm. It should be lowest late in the evening as you prepare for sleep, remain low through the night, and then begin to rise gradually in the early morning hours, peaking around the time you wake up. This rise is known as the cortisol awakening response, and it helps provide energy and alertness to start the day. The problem arises when this natural rhythm becomes disrupted. Stress is the most common factor that throws cortisol out of balance. When you experience stress, whether it is emotional stress from work pressures, financial difficulties, or relationship struggles, or physical stress from poor diet, lack of exercise, or illness, your body interprets it as a signal to produce more cortisol. The stress response is designed to be short-term. For our ancestors, it was a way to survive immediate dangers. If you were being chased by a predator, the surge of cortisol would elevate your heart rate, sharpen your focus, and mobilize energy stores so you could fight or run. But in the modern world, stress is rarely so clear-cut. Instead of short bursts, many people live in a state of chronic stress where cortisol remains elevated at times when it should naturally be low. Now, let's connect this directly to why so many people, particularly men, find themselves waking up at 3 a.m. When cortisol levels remain high in the evening, the body struggles to maintain the deep, restorative phases of sleep. Instead of entering long stretches of uninterrupted slow wave and REM sleep, you become more prone to light sleep, where the brain is easily awakened. Around 2 or 3 a.m., the body is in a particularly delicate stage of the sleep cycle. This is the point where your core temperature is at its lowest and your body is especially vulnerable to disturbances. If cortisol spikes during this time, even slightly, it can jolt you awake, leaving you staring at the ceiling while the rest of the world sleeps. To understand this more deeply, it helps to look at how cortisol interacts with other hormones and systems in the body. Cortisol is closely tied to the circadian rhythm, the internal biological clock that governs sleep, wakefulness, digestion, and even immune function. Normally, cortisol works in tandem with another hormone called melatonin. Melatonin rises in the evening, promoting relaxation and preparing the body for sleep, while cortisol gradually falls. In the early morning, melatonin decreases while cortisol increases, ensuring a smooth transition into wakefulness. When stress interferes with this balance, melatonin production may be suppressed, while cortisol remains higher than it should be. This leads not only to difficulty falling asleep, but also to those frustrating middle-of-the-night awakenings. In men, there are additional considerations. Chronic stress and elevated cortisol can have ripple effects on testosterone levels. Testosterone, which is vital for energy, mood, and muscle maintenance, is often produced during the night, particularly in deep sleep stages. If cortisol is surging when the body is trying to restore itself, testosterone production can be compromised. This creates a cycle where poor sleep reduces hormone balance, and reduced hormone balance further worsens sleep. Over time, men may notice not only disrupted nights, but also fatigue, irritability, decreased motivation, and even reduced physical performance during the day. These changes can feed back into stress itself, as feeling unwell physically and mentally creates more strain on daily life. Another key element of cortisol's effect at 3 a.m. has to do with its relationship to blood sugar. Cortisol is part of the system that helps regulate glucose in the bloodstream. Under stress, cortisol instructs the liver to release stored glucose to provide immediate energy. At night, especially if you have eaten a large meal or consumed alcohol before bed, blood sugar can fluctuate. A drop in blood sugar during the early hours of the morning may trigger the release of cortisol as the body attempts to stabilize itself. This release can be strong enough to wake you. Many people describe this as waking suddenly, sometimes with a racing heart or a sense of unease, unable to fall back asleep for an hour or more. There is also a neurological side to this story. Cortisol directly affects the brain, particularly areas like the hippocampus and amygdala, which are involved in memory, emotion, and the regulation of the stress response. Elevated cortisol during the night can activate the amygdala, the part of the brain associated with fear and anxiety. This is why waking up at 3 a.m. often comes with racing thoughts, worries about work, finances, or family, and an inability to calm down. It's not just that you are awake, it's that your brain is in a state of alertness it was never meant to experience during those hours. This mental restlessness reinforces the physical stress response, creating a feedback loop that keeps you awake far longer than you'd like. Research in sleep medicine has shown that men who experience frequent awakenings at 3 a.m. often have higher baseline cortisol levels compared to those who sleep uninterrupted. These levels may not be extremely high in the way they would be during acute stress, but they are elevated enough to disturb sleep architecture. Over months and years, this pattern can increase the risk of cardiovascular problems, high blood pressure, weight gain, and even depression. The body is not designed to handle continuous exposure to stress hormones. Sleep is supposed to be the time when cortisol is at its lowest, allowing for repair, regeneration, and hormonal balance. When that rest period is invaded by stress chemistry, the entire system suffers. It's also important to point out that cortisol does not act alone. It works alongside adrenaline, another stress hormone produced by the adrenal glands. While cortisol has more gradual, long-term effects, adrenaline provides the immediate rush associated with stress. Even if you are not consciously stressed when you go to bed, unresolved anxieties from the day can keep these systems subtly active. At 3 a.m., a small surge of adrenaline combined with cortisol can be just enough to bring you out of sleep. This is why some people wake up with their heart pounding, almost as if they have just had a nightmare, even when no dream was involved. The physiological stress response is playing out in real time. Lifestyle factors amplify this problem. Caffeine, for example, stimulates cortisol release. If consumed late in the day, even if you don't feel wired, it can delay the natural decline of cortisol at night. Similarly, exposure to bright screens before bed suppresses melatonin and signals the brain that it is still daytime, keeping cortisol higher. Over time, this mismatch between lifestyle and biology can create a pattern where waking at 3 a.m. becomes the new normal. Once the body falls into this rhythm, it can be surprisingly difficult to break because the brain begins to expect it. Essentially, the stress response becomes conditioned, almost like a habit. Another interesting aspect is the cultural component. Many men grow up with the belief that stress is something to be endured or ignored, not managed. The push-through mentality may help in the short term, but it often leads to suppressed emotions and unaddressed stressors. The body, however, does not ignore stress. It registers it at the biochemical level, whether or not the mind acknowledges it. This is why so many men are surprised when health issues appear seemingly out of nowhere. In reality, the body has been signaling imbalance for years, often through disrupted sleep, but the signals were not recognized for what they were. Scientific studies using salivary cortisol measurements show a clear link between stress levels during the day and awakenings during the night. Individuals who report high work-related stress, for example, tend to have higher evening cortisol and more frequent night awakenings. This relationship is dose-dependent, meaning the more stress carried into the evening, the more likely the person is to wake up around 3 a.m. It is a pattern so consistent that sleep researchers often use 3 a.m. awakenings as a marker of stress-related insomnia. One factor that complicates this picture is that not all stress is conscious. You may not feel particularly anxious or overwhelmed, yet your body could still be under stress from poor nutrition, lack of exercise, or chronic inflammation. All of these trigger cortisol in the same way emotional stress does. For instance, diets high in processed sugars and fats can create metabolic stress, which keeps cortisol elevated. Similarly, sedentary lifestyles reduce the body's ability to regulate stress hormones effectively. Inflammation from underlying health issues, such as undiagnosed sleep apnea or even digestive disorders, also raises cortisol. So when you wake up at 3 a.m., it may not always be because of something you worried about before bed. It could be your body responding to internal imbalances. This makes the issue of 3 a.m. awakenings a powerful signal of health that should not be ignored. The body is trying to communicate that its stress system is overactive, out of rhythm, and interfering with basic restorative processes. For men, who may already be dealing with unique pressures related to career, family responsibilities, and health changes as they age, this signal is especially important. Ignoring it can mean compounding stress-related health risks that appear later in life. Understanding cortisol's role gives us not just insight into why it happens, but also a starting point for making changes that can restore balance. When we think about waking up at 3 in the morning, many people immediately assume it must be stress or perhaps an overactive mind. While stress is certainly one of the main reasons behind it, another equally powerful factor is the collection of lifestyle habits that interfere with the circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm is the body's internal 24-hour clock that governs not only sleep and wakefulness, but also hormone release, digestion, body temperature, and even immune system function. It is incredibly sensitive to the environment, especially light food and activity. When this rhythm is thrown out of sync, it becomes very difficult for the brain and body to maintain steady, deep sleep. That is why seemingly small daily choices, what you eat, when you exercise, how much screen time you get before bed, can have a profound impact on whether you wake up refreshed or find yourself wide awake at 3 in the morning. The circadian rhythm is regulated by a part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, located in the hypothalamus. This cluster of neurons acts like a master clock, synchronizing bodily functions based on environmental cues. The most powerful cue is light. Sunlight in the morning signals the clock to start the day, while darkness in the evening signals the body to wind down. In an ideal situation, this alignment allows melatonin, the hormone that promotes sleep, to rise in the evening and cortisol to fall, while in the morning cortisol rises and melatonin falls. Unfortunately, many modern lifestyle habits send conflicting signals to this system, creating a mismatch between internal time and external time. This mismatch is often called circadian misalignment, and it is one of the major causes of disrupted sleep patterns. One of the clearest examples of this is exposure to artificial light at night, especially the blue light emitted from phones, laptops, and televisions. The human brain interprets this light as daylight, even when it is late at night. This suppresses melatonin production and keeps the brain in a state of alertness. Even if you feel tired and eventually fall asleep, melatonin levels may not rise as they should, leading to shallow sleep and an increased likelihood of waking up in the early hours of the morning. Studies have shown that just 2 hours of screen exposure before bed can delay melatonin release by as much as 90 minutes. That delay may not stop you from falling asleep initially, but it shifts your internal clock enough that you may find yourself waking in the middle of the night, completely out of sync with your environment. Diet also plays a powerful role in shaping circadian rhythms. The timing of meals, the quality of food, and the balance of nutrients all affect how well your body can maintain stable sleep. Eating large meals late in the evening, especially meals high in sugar or processed carbohydrates, causes blood sugar spikes followed by crashes during the night. When blood sugar drops too low around 2 or 3 a.m., the body responds by releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline to stabilize glucose levels. That surge is often strong enough to wake you up. On the other hand, alcohol, though it might initially make you drowsy, interferes with REM sleep and leads to more frequent awakenings. Many people do not realize that a glass or two of wine before bed is one of the most common lifestyle habits that fragment sleep cycles. The body works hard to metabolize alcohol during the night, and this metabolic activity prevents the brain from staying in deep, restorative phases of sleep. Caffeine is another major culprit. It blocks adenosine, a chemical that builds up in the brain throughout the day to create sleep pressure. While some people can fall asleep after drinking caffeine in the afternoon, the substance can still linger in the body for many hours, raising cortisol and preventing the normal decline of alertness hormones at night. For men especially, caffeine combined with chronic stress can create a pattern where cortisol remains elevated well into the night, making them more likely to wake during the light stages of sleep around 3 a.m. What makes this worse is that many people then rely on more caffeine the next morning to overcome fatigue, perpetuating the cycle. Exercise habits also interact with circadian rhythms. Physical activity is essential for good sleep, but the timing of it matters. Moderate exercise in the morning or afternoon can help anchor the circadian rhythm, promote melatonin release later in the evening, and improve the quality of deep sleep. However, vigorous exercise too close to bedtime can raise core body temperature, stimulate adrenaline, and increase cortisol levels. This stimulation can linger, preventing the body from entering a calm state needed for sleep. Over time, late-night exercise can act like a signal telling the body that evening is still part of the active day, delaying the onset of deep sleep and making nighttime awakenings more likely. Shift work is another significant factor that disrupts circadian rhythms. Men who work rotating shifts, night shifts, or irregular hours often find themselves constantly fighting against their internal clock. The body is simply not designed to be awake at night and asleep during the day. Light exposure, meal timing, and activity patterns all conflict with the natural rhythm. Even on days off, the circadian system struggles to reset. The result is fragmented sleep, frequent awakenings, and higher levels of fatigue. For many, waking up around 3 a.m. becomes a routine occurrence simply because the body clock never finds stable alignment. Over time, this chronic circadian disruption increases the risk of metabolic disorders, cardiovascular disease, and mood problems. The role of environment cannot be underestimated either. Bedroom conditions such as temperature, noise, and light pollution can have a direct impact on circadian signals. The body expects cooler temperatures during the night to promote deep sleep. If the room is too warm, the body struggles to lower its core temperature and sleep becomes more restless. Noise, even if it does not fully wake you, can shift you into lighter stages of sleep, leaving you vulnerable to waking up completely at 3 a.m. Streetlights or electronic devices emitting even small amounts of light can be enough to reduce melatonin production, keeping your circadian rhythm slightly off balance. These environmental factors combine with lifestyle habits to create a cumulative effect on sleep quality. Another layer to this story is the way circadian rhythms interact with mental health. Poor lifestyle habits that disrupt the rhythm also affect mood, and mood disturbances in turn feed back into sleep. Men under chronic lifestyle-related circadian disruption are more likely to experience irritability, anxiety, and depressive symptoms. These mental health challenges often manifest at night in the form of rumination, racing thoughts, or an inability to relax. Waking up at 3 a.m. with a restless mind can be partly due to cortisol, but it can also be a consequence of misaligned circadian biology interacting with mental stress. This complex interplay makes lifestyle modification a crucial step in breaking the cycle. What is especially striking is how quickly lifestyle changes can begin to improve circadian rhythms. Studies show that increasing exposure to natural light in the morning, even just 20 minutes of outdoor sunlight, helps reset the master clock and improve sleep continuity. Similarly, avoiding bright artificial light in the 2 hours before bedtime allows melatonin to rise naturally, reducing nighttime awakenings. Consistent sleep schedules, going to bed and waking up at the same times every day, including weekends, reinforce circadian stability. Even small adjustments, such as having the last meal at least 3 hours before bedtime or limiting caffeine intake to the morning, can dramatically improve the likelihood of sleeping through the night without waking. It is also worth noting that circadian rhythms are not just about sleep and wake cycles, but extend to nearly every process in the body. Organs like the liver, pancreas, and heart all operate on their own circadian clocks, coordinated by the brain. When lifestyle habits disrupt this system, it does not only affect sleep. It affects digestion, metabolism, cardiovascular function, and immune defense. This is why chronic circadian disruption is linked to long-term health risks. But the earliest and most obvious symptom is often the simple frustration of waking up at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering why you cannot sleep. In that moment, what you're experiencing is not random, but the downstream effect of lifestyle habits accumulated over time, pulling your internal rhythms out of sync. For men in particular, lifestyle-driven circadian disruption can carry unique consequences. Testosterone production, which peaks during the night, relies heavily on uninterrupted sleep. If circadian misalignment leads to repeated awakenings, testosterone levels gradually decline. This not only affects energy and mood, but also muscle maintenance, bone density, and overall vitality. Many men do not connect their early morning awakenings with changes in testosterone, but the relationship is direct. Poor sleep reduces hormone balance, and poor hormone balance feeds back into sleep disruption. It becomes a cycle that only lifestyle correction can break. When we look at the issue of waking up at 3 in the morning, one of the most encouraging points to remember is that it is not a permanent condition. While stress and poor lifestyle habits can set the stage for these sleep disruptions, the human body is remarkably adaptable and capable of resetting itself when given the right support. Restoring healthy sleep patterns does not usually depend on any single change, but rather on a collection of small, consistent adjustments that together help the circadian rhythm realign, reduce cortisol at night, and promote uninterrupted rest. These steps are practical, evidence-based, and within reach for almost anyone who wants to improve their nights and by extension their overall health. The first and perhaps most powerful step is consistency. The brain and body thrive on predictable rhythms. Going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time each day helps reinforce the body's internal clock. Even if you feel tempted to sleep in on weekends, maintaining a steady schedule trains your circadian rhythm to expect sleep at a certain time, making it easier to fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake feeling refreshed. Research has consistently shown that irregular sleep schedules are strongly linked to nighttime awakenings. By contrast, regularity acts as a signal to the body that it can lower cortisol reliably in the evening and prepare for a deep, uninterrupted sleep window. Morning light exposure is another practical and very effective intervention. Sunlight is the most powerful cue for the circadian rhythm. When you expose your eyes to natural light within the first hour of waking, even for 15 to 20 minutes, you send a strong signal to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain that the day has begun. This starts a timer that will lead to the natural release of melatonin about 14 to 16 hours later. For example, if you get bright sunlight exposure at 7 a.m., your body will be primed to release melatonin around 9 to 11 p.m., promoting restful sleep. On cloudy days or in winter months, outdoor light is still stronger than indoor artificial lighting and remains beneficial. For those who cannot access natural light, light therapy lamps designed to mimic daylight can be a helpful alternative. By strengthening the morning signal, you reduce the likelihood of your circadian rhythm drifting, which lowers the chances of waking up at 3 in the morning. Evening routines are equally important. Just as morning light signals the start of the day, darkness signals the approach of night. Dimming lights in the home 2 hours before bed, reducing screen exposure, or using blue light filters on devices helps melatonin rise naturally. Creating an environment that mimics dusk prepares both the brain and body for sleep, Studies show that people who consistently use dim light and avoid screens in the 2 hours before bedtime not only fall asleep more easily, but also experience fewer awakenings during the night. For men who often carry work or entertainment into late night hours on laptops or phones, making this adjustment can be one of the simplest and most effective steps toward better sleep continuity. The role of diet cannot be ignored. To minimize the chance of waking up at 3 a.m., paying attention to meal timing and composition is essential. Large meals late at night, especially those high in sugar or refined carbohydrates, destabilize blood sugar and increase the risk of night-time cortisol release. Instead, consuming the last substantial meal at least 3 hours before bed allows digestion to wind down and glucose to stabilize. If hunger strikes closer to bedtime, a small snack with protein and complex carbohydrates, such as yogurt with oats or a handful of nuts, can provide slow-release energy that supports sleep without spiking blood sugar. Alcohol is best minimized or avoided as it fragments sleep cycles. Even small amounts interfere with REM sleep, making awakenings more likely. Caffeine should ideally be cut off at least 6 to 8 hours before bedtime, as its half-life in the body is long enough to disrupt the natural evening decline in alertness hormones. These dietary practices form a foundation that supports stable circadian rhythms and reduces the metabolic triggers for night-time awakenings. Exercise provides another practical pathway to restoring healthy sleep. Physical activity helps regulate cortisol, reduce stress, and enhance sleep depth. People who exercise regularly tend to fall asleep faster and spend more time in restorative stages of sleep. However, timing matters. Morning or afternoon exercise provides the most benefit, as it aligns with the body's natural rise in cortisol and promotes relaxation later in the evening. Vigorous exercise right before bed, on the other hand, can be stimulating, keeping cortisol high and delaying sleep onset. Even moderate activities such as walking, stretching, or light resistance training earlier in the day can have significant effects on improving circadian alignment and minimizing awakenings at night. For men in particular, maintaining muscle mass and cardiovascular health through regular exercise not only supports sleep, but also sustains testosterone production, which depends heavily on high-quality rest. The sleep environment itself is a cornerstone of practical solutions. Bedrooms that are cool, dark, and quiet provide the best conditions for uninterrupted sleep. The ideal room temperature is generally between 16 to 19 degrees Celsius, as the body naturally lowers its core temperature during the night. Using blackout curtains or sleep masks helps block out light pollution that can suppress melatonin. White noise machines or earplugs can mask environmental sounds that would otherwise shift you into lighter stages of sleep. Even seemingly minor factors, such as an uncomfortable mattress or pillow, can contribute to restless nights and early morning awakenings. Optimizing the bedroom environment ensures that once you fall asleep, external disturbances are minimized, giving your body the best chance to complete full sleep cycles without interruption. Stress management techniques are another practical and often overlooked set of tools. Because cortisol is so central to the problem of waking at 3 a.m., finding ways to lower evening stress is critical. Practices such as mindfulness meditation, deep breathing, or progressive muscle relaxation before bed have been shown in clinical studies to reduce cortisol and promote relaxation. Even dedicating 10 minutes to slow, deep breathing can shift the nervous system from a state of alertness into one of rest, lowering the threshold for sleep and making it less likely that you will wake during the night. Journaling before bed, especially writing down worries or tasks for the next day, can also be surprisingly effective. It allows the brain to offload concerns, reducing the chance of waking in the early hours with racing thoughts. For men who may be less inclined to openly discuss stress, these practical, private techniques can make a meaningful difference in calming the mind and body before sleep. Hydration is another subtle but important factor. Both dehydration and overhydration can disturb sleep. Drinking enough water throughout the day supports overall health and sleep quality, but excessive fluid intake in the evening can lead to nighttime bathroom trips, which interrupt sleep cycles. Balancing hydration by front-loading fluid intake earlier in the day and reducing it in the last 2 hours before bed can reduce awakenings caused by nocturia, a common problem for men as they age. Another practical step is managing exposure to stimulants and information late at night. Not only caffeine but also emotionally stimulating activities, such as engaging in heated discussions, working on stressful projects, or consuming intense news or media before bed, can keep the nervous system in a heightened state. The brain does not easily shift from high engagement to rest. Creating a wind-down routine that involves calming activities, reading a book, listening to quiet music, or taking a warm shower, signals to the body that it is time to transition towards sleep. These cues become habits that the circadian system learns to recognize, strengthening the body's readiness for uninterrupted rest. In some cases, supplements may provide additional support. While lifestyle changes are the foundation, certain nutrients play roles in sleep regulation. Magnesium, for example, supports relaxation of muscles and the nervous system, and deficiencies are associated with sleep problems. Melatonin supplements, when used carefully and in small doses, can help reset circadian rhythms, especially for people experiencing jet lag or shift work. However, it is important to approach supplements cautiously as they are most effective when used alongside, not instead of, foundational lifestyle adjustments. Over-reliance on supplements without addressing habits rarely resolves the core issue of waking at 3 in the morning. Underlying medical issues should also be considered. Sleep apnea, for instance, is a condition where breathing repeatedly stops and starts during sleep, often leading to sudden awakenings. Men are at higher risk for sleep apnea, particularly those who are overweight or have structural airway differences. Restless leg syndrome, chronic pain, and certain medications can also contribute to night-time awakenings. Seeking medical evaluation when lifestyle changes alone are not sufficient is a practical step that ensures underlying conditions are not overlooked. Addressing these medical factors often brings significant improvement in sleep quality. What ties all these practical steps together is the principle of balance. The circadian rhythm thrives when daily behaviors are predictable, aligned with natural light and dark cycles, and free from excessive stimulation late at night. Small changes, consistent schedules, light management, mindful eating, exercise timing, environmental adjustment, and stress reduction collectively send a powerful signal to the body that it is safe to rest deeply through the night. Each adjustment may seem minor on its own, but together they create the conditions that allow cortisol to follow its natural rhythm, melatonin to rise appropriately, and the body to stay asleep past the vulnerable window of 3 in the morning.